After his incredible victory, David is welcomed back to the city of Gibeah, not just as a shepherd boy, but as a national hero. Imagine the scene. A massive parade snakes through the streets, flowers raining down from every window and rooftop. The air is electric with excitement and joy. Leading this procession is none other than King Saul himself, with his son, Prince Jonathan, and right beside them, David. In his hand, David carries the very sword he used to defeat Goliath, a tangible symbol of his impossible triumph. The crowd is just ecstatic, their cheers echoing off the city walls. As they march, women pour out from all the surrounding cities to join the celebration. They're singing, dancing, and playing tambourines, their faces alight with pure happiness. Their song catches on, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. And what are they singing? Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. Suddenly, King Saul stops walking. The proud, kingly smile that had been on his face just moments before completely vanishes. He turns his head and looks at David. David, for his part, is still waving to the crowd, a picture of humility, almost overwhelmed by the adoration being showered upon him. But Saul isn't seeing a humble hero. He's hearing those words echo in his mind. He mutters to himself, his voice a low, dangerous growl beneath the noise of the celebration. They have credited David with tens of thousands, but me with only thousands? What more can he get but the kingdom? In that single moment, everything changes. The camera of our imagination zooms in on Saul's face. The benevolent, powerful king is gone. In his place is a man consumed by a corrosive, burning jealousy. His eyes narrow, fixed on David with a new, dark intensity. It's a look of suspicion, of resentment, of fear. The joy of the victory is completely overshadowed by the seed of envy planted in the king's heart. And so it was. From that day forward, Saul no longer saw David as the brave young man who saved Israel. He saw a rival, a threat. From that day on, Saul kept a jealous and watchful eye on David, and the shadow of the king's anger would begin to follow the young hero wherever he went. Have you ever had a moment where everything you thought was good suddenly soured? That's exactly what happened right after David's greatest victory. Imagine this. A massive parade snakes through the streets. Flowers rain down from the windows, and the entire city is ecstatic. There's David, walking beside King Saul and his best friend, Prince Jonathan. He's holding Goliath's massive sword, a symbol of his incredible triumph. The crowd is just losing their minds, chanting his name. It's a hero's welcome, the kind of thing you only see in legends. Women pour out from all the cities, dancing, singing, and playing tambourines. The atmosphere is electric, pure joy and celebration. It's a national holiday, a day of deliverance, and David is the man of the hour. Then, amidst all this cheering, a song rises above the noise. The women are singing, "Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands." A simple song, right? A song of praise. But those words hit King Saul like a physical blow. He stops dead in his tracks. The smile that was plastered on his face just moments before completely vanishes. He turns and looks at David, and what does he see? He sees a young man, humble and maybe a little overwhelmed, waving to the adoring crowd. He's not seeking glory, it's just being showered upon him. But Saul doesn't see humility. He sees a threat. Saul starts muttering to himself, his voice a low, venomous hiss lost in the roar of the crowd. They have credited David with tens of thousands. He sees, but me with only thousands? What more can he get but the kingdom? In that single moment, everything changed. The victory celebration turned into a crucible of jealousy. The king, who should have been leading the praise, was instead consumed by a dark, corrosive envy. His eyes, once symbols of royal authority, narrow into slits. The camera of our story zooms in on his face, and it's no longer the face of a king. It's the face of a man eaten alive by jealousy. The hero of the nation has just become the king's #1 enemy. And from that day on, Saul kept a jealous, watchful, and dangerous eye on David. This is a pivotal moment. It's not just about a song or a parade anymore. It's about the birth of an obsession, a royal rivalry that will shape the destiny of an entire nation. Saul's jealousy wasn't just a fleeting feeling. It became a consuming fire. Think about it. David did exactly what Saul and the entire army were terrified to do. He saved them. He should have been rewarded with unwavering loyalty from his king. Instead, his success planted a seed of fear and resentment in Saul's heart. This is a classic human story, isn't it? When someone else's light shines too brightly, some people don't just feel overshadowed. They feel threatened. They don't celebrate the light. They want to extinguish it. Saul's reaction reveals a deep insecurity at his core. A true, confident leader would have seen David's victory as a victory for the whole kingdom, a sign of God's favor on his reign. He would have celebrated David, promoted him, and used his talents for the good of the nation. But Saul's ego was too fragile. The people's praise for David felt like a personal insult, a direct challenge to his authority. He couldn't see David as an asset. He could only see him as a rival who was stealing his glory and potentially his throne. This paranoia would begin to cloud his judgment and lead him down a very dark path. Let's pause and consider the dynamics here. You have Saul, the established king, chosen by God, but now struggling with his own disobedience and insecurities. Then you have David, the young shepherd boy, anointed in secret by the prophet Samuel, filled with faith and courage. He's not plotting to take the throne. He's just serving his king and his God with a pure heart. But in the twisted logic of a jealous mind, David's purity and success are the very things that make him so dangerous. Saul can't comprehend that someone could be that good, that blessed, without having a hidden agenda. The tragedy is that Saul creates the very enemy he fears. By treating David with suspicion and hostility, he sets in motion a chain of events that will ultimately lead to his own downfall. His jealousy becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Instead of nurturing the greatest warrior in his kingdom, he decides to hunt him. This decision doesn't come from a place of political strategy or wisdom. It comes from a place of pure, raw, emotional poison. It's a reminder of how destructive envy can be, not just for the person who is envied, but especially for the person who is envious. It corrupts from the inside out, turning leaders into tyrants and heroes into villains in their own minds. The song itself is fascinating. Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. It was probably just an enthusiastic, poetic exaggeration by the celebrating women. They weren't making a political statement. They were just caught up in the euphoria of the moment. They were celebrating an impossible victory. But Saul heard it as a calculated comparison, a public declaration of who the people really saw as their champion. He heard the math, and the math didn't favor him. 1,000 versus 10,000. It was an order of magnitude difference, and in his mind, that translated directly to his worth and his grip on power. This is where the public perception and private reality of leadership collide. Publicly, Saul had to maintain the appearance of a grateful and magnanimous king. But privately, his mind was racing, connecting dots that weren't there, and building a narrative of betrayal and conspiracy. The cheers of the crowd became the soundtrack to his growing paranoia. Every cheer for David was a nail in the coffin of Saul's peace of mind. And for David, this moment marks the beginning of a long and perilous journey. He has defeated the giant in front of him, but now he faces a much more complex and dangerous foe, the giant of jealousy lurking within his own king's heart. This new battle won't be fought with a sling and a stone on an open field. It will be fought in the shadows, in the corridors of power, and in the wilderness, as David is forced to flee for his life from the very man he sought to serve. The victory parade was over, but the war for David's life had just begun. In the sun-drenched gardens of the palace, a solitary figure was engrossed in his task. David, the young shepherd boy, who had just become a national hero, was quietly cleaning his gear. The dust and grime of the battlefield clung to his simple leather sling and shepherd's staff. He was alone, lost in his thoughts, perhaps replaying the incredible events of the day. The cheers of the crowd, the fall of the giant, the stunned silence, and then the roar of victory. It all felt like a dream. Suddenly, a shadow fell over him. David looked up to see Prince Jonathan, the son of King Saul, approaching. Jonathan was a warrior in his own right, a man of noble bearing and respected throughout the kingdom. His face, however, held none of the dark jealousy that was already clouding his father's features. Instead, Jonathan's eyes were filled with genuine admiration and a deep, searching respect. He had watched David's improbable duel from the royal pavilion, and what he saw had stirred something profound within him. Jonathan stopped a few feet from David, a warm smile gracing his lips. "You fought well, David," he said, his voice rich with sincerity. "I have never seen such faith." He wasn't just talking about skill with a sling or the courage to face a giant. He was talking about the unwavering trust in God that had powered David's every move, a faith so pure and absolute that it seemed to radiate from the young shepherd. It was a faith that Jonathan, for all his royal training and military prowess, felt he had lost sight of. David, ever humble, paused his work and rose to his feet, offering a respectful bow. "I only did what had to be done, my prince," he replied simply. There was no boastfulness in his tone, no hint of pride. To David, it was not a matter of choice or glory. A threat had arisen against his people and his God, and he had simply answered the call. He saw it as his duty, nothing more, nothing less. But Jonathan saw it differently. He saw a purity of heart and purpose that put his own royal inaction to shame. Jonathan shook his head slowly, his gaze intense. "No," he insisted, stepping closer. "You did what I should have done." The confession hung in the air between them, a startling admission of vulnerability from a prince. As the heir to the throne and a leader of the army, Jonathan felt a deep sense of responsibility for the safety of Israel. He had seen the fear in his own soldiers' eyes, felt the paralysis that gripped the camp in the face of Goliath's taunts. He, too, had been afraid. But this shepherd boy had not been. "My soul is knit to yours," Jonathan declared, his voice filled with a powerful emotion that took David by surprise. It was a recognition of a kindred spirit, a bond that transcended rank, status, and experience. In a move that stunned David, Jonathan began to remove his own royal attire. First, he unclasped the magnificent robe from his shoulders, a garment of purple and gold, a symbol of his royal lineage and authority, and placed it gently over David's simple, warm tunic. The heavy, rich fabric felt alien on David's shoulders. Then Jonathan unbuckled his sword, a finely crafted weapon with a gilded hilt, the mark of a commander. He handed it to David. Next came his bow, a warrior's longbow, strong and perfectly balanced. Finally, he unfastened his belt, a thick leather band that held his weapons and signified his status as a soldier of Israel. He gave all of it to David. This was no mere gift-giving. In their culture, this was an act of profound significance. Jonathan was symbolically transferring his own identity, his rights as the prince and heir, to the shepherd boy. He was publicly declaring David as his equal, his brother. It was an act of incredible humility and love, an open rejection of the jealousy and ambition that so often defined royal courts. David stood there, draped in the prince's regalia, holding the weapons of a royal warrior, utterly speechless. He looked at Jonathan, trying to comprehend the depth of this gesture. Jonathan looked David directly in the eyes, his expression unwavering and earnest. "From this day, we are brothers," he declared, his voice firm with conviction. I swear a covenant with you. A covenant was the most sacred of oaths, a binding agreement before God that was unbreakable. It was a promise of loyalty, protection, and unwavering support. No matter what happens, Jonathan continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper, we stand together. He was foreseeing the political storms that were sure to come, the envy and danger that would now surround David. He was pledging his allegiance, not to the crown or to his father, but to the man who stood before him. Jonathan extended his arm, and David, understanding the weight of the moment, met it with his own. They clasped forearms, their hands gripping each other tightly. It was the grip of warriors, of brothers. In that simple, powerful touch, a bond was forged, a bond of love and loyalty that would be tested by kings and wars, by jealousy and tragedy, a bond that would become legendary, a bond stronger than blood. The flickering torchlight casts long, dancing shadows across the throne room, making the cavernous space feel even more oppressive. There, slumped on his grand throne, sits King Saul. He's a shadow of his former self. His hair is matted, his clothes disheveled, and a sheen of sweat covers his brow. His knuckles are white as he grips a heavy javelin, his eyes fixed on some unseen horror in the empty air before him. The atmosphere is thick with tension, a palpable sense of dread that has fallen over the entire palace. In a far corner, a small group of servants huddle together, their voices hushed, anxious whispers. One of them, a loyal attendant who has served the king for years, wrings his hands. Look at him, he murmurs, his eyes filled with pity and fear. The dark mood, the evil spirit. It has a hold on him again. Another servant nods grimly. Nothing we do can reach him when he's like this. The first servant straightens up with a flicker of hope. Call for David, he insists. Send for the boy. His music. His music is the only thing that calms the king's tormented soul. Go now, quickly. A short while later, the heavy doors swing open silently, and David steps into the room. He moves with a quiet grace, his simple shepherd's clothes a stark contrast to the royal chamber. In his hands he carries his beloved harp, its wooden frame worn smooth from countless hours of practice. He doesn't approach the throne directly, understanding the king's volatile state. Instead, he finds a spot in the corner, a respectful distance away, and settles onto a small stool. He takes a moment, his gaze resting briefly on the troubled king, a look of profound compassion on his young face. Then his fingers touch the strings. A soft, hauntingly beautiful melody begins to fill the oppressive silence. The notes are gentle at first, like a cool stream flowing over stones, weaving a tapestry of sound that is both sorrowful and filled with an unyielding hope. The melody seems to have a life of its own, reaching out into the shadows, pushing back the darkness that clings to the walls and to the king's heart. As the music swells, a subtle change comes over Saul. The rigid tension in his shoulders begins to ease. His frantic, shallow breathing slows, becoming deeper, more regular. The wild, unfocused look in his eyes softens. Slowly, as if pulled from a waking nightmare, he closes his eyes, letting the waves of music wash over him. The tight grip on the javelin loosens, just slightly. For a moment, the storm inside him seems to have been tamed. The servants watch, holding their breath, praying that the simple shepherd boy's song can once again soothe their tormented king. It seems to be working. A fragile peace settles over the throne room, hanging delicately in the air, as fragile as the melody itself. Hello everyone, and welcome back. We re-diving deep into one of the most intense and pivotal moments in the story of David and Saul. Picture this. The throne room is filled with the beautiful, worshipful notes of David's harp. He's completely lost in the music, his eyes closed, pouring his heart out to God. He's in a state of pure devotion, totally unaware of the danger brewing just a few feet away. He's young, he's faithful, and in this moment, he is utterly defenseless. But while David is lost in his music, a different kind of sound is echoing in King Saul's mind. It's not the peaceful melody of the harp. It's the chant of the crowds, the words that have become a poison in his soul. Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. Every time he hears that phrase, it's like a fresh wound. It fuels his insecurity, his paranoia, and the dark spirit that has taken hold of him. He sees David not as a loyal servant soothing his troubled mind, but as a rival, a threat to his throne, a rising star whose light threatens to extinguish his own. As David plays on, Saul's eyes snap open. The worshipful atmosphere of the room is shattered by the storm raging within the king. The madness returns, twisting his features into a mask of pure rage and jealousy. His hand, which should be a symbol of royal authority and protection, tightens around the shaft of his spear. The polished wood and cold metal feel like an extension of his own dark thoughts. The song of the women plays on a loop in his head, a relentless taunt. Tens of thousands ... tens of thousands ... It's more than he can bear. Leaning forward, with a voice that's barely a whisper, but laced with venomous intent, Saul murmurs his deadly plan to himself. I will pin David to the wall. It's a chilling declaration, a sentence passed in the court of his own tormented mind. He's no longer just a king struggling with his emotions. He's a man on the brink of committing a terrible act, deciding in this moment to eliminate the source of his envy. The decision is made. The air in the throne room grows heavy, thick with unspoken violence, a silent witness to a king's descent into darkness. Then, everything explodes into motion. With a sudden violent surge, Saul rises from his throne. The movement is not graceful or kingly. It's the lurch of a predator. He draws his arm back, the muscles in his shoulder and back coiling like a serpent ready to strike. The spear is now aimed, a deadly projectile in the hands of a mad king. At that exact moment, as if warned by a divine whisper or a sudden chill in the air, David's eyes fly open. The first thing he sees is the glint of the metal spear tip, flickering menacingly in the firelight. The beautiful song dies in his throat, replaced by a surge of pure terror. With all the force he can muster, Saul hurls the spear. It's a throw meant to kill, fueled by months of resentment and paranoia. The weapon cuts through the air, a bronze blur aimed straight at David's heart. But David reacts with the lightning-fast reflexes of a warrior. He throws himself to the side, a desperate, instinctual dive for his life. The world seems to slow down as the spear flies past his ear, so close he can feel the rush of air. Then, reality crashes back in with a deafening thud. The spear slams deep into the wooden wall, right behind where he had been sitting, the shaft vibrating violently from the sheer force of the impact. David scrambles to his feet, his heart pounding in his chest, his mind reeling from the near-death experience. The music is gone, replaced by the sound of his own ragged breathing and the humming of the spear shaft still quivering in the wall. He looks at Saul, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief. This wasn't an accident. This was a deliberate attempt on his life by the king he had sworn to serve. And the look on Saul's face confirms his worst fears. The king is breathing heavily, his chest heaving, his eyes still burning with murderous rage. He's not done. His hand is already reaching for another weapon, ready to finish the job. There's no time to think, no time to ask why. Survival is the only thought in David's mind. He turns and runs. He bolts from the throne room, fleeing the presence of the king who has just tried to murder him. He leaves behind his harp, the symbol of his service and his worship, and flees for his life. The heavy doors of the throne room slam shut behind him. But the echo of that thudding spear and the image of Saul's enraged face are seared into his memory. This single act of violence changes everything. The relationship between the king and the young hero is irrevocably broken. From this moment on, David is no longer just a court musician or a celebrated warrior. He is a fugitive, hunted by the very man he sought to serve. The palace, once a place of opportunity, has become a death trap. And David's life is now on a completely different course, one that will be filled with danger, exile, and a constant reliance on his God to deliver him from the hand of the king. This attack marks the beginning of a long and perilous journey for David, a trial by fire that will ultimately shape him into the king he is destined to become. Ever found yourself in a situation where you did everything right, but things still went horribly wrong? You gave it your all, you were the hero of the hour, and then suddenly you're the one being hunted. That's exactly where we find our hero, David, tonight. Just a short while ago, he was the talk of the town, the giant slayer, the celebrated warrior. He had the king's favor, the people's love, and even the hand of the king's daughter in marriage. Life was good. But jealousy, my friends, is a powerful and destructive force. King Saul, once David's mentor and father-in-law, is now consumed by a dark envy that has turned him into David's most dangerous enemy. The man who sat on the throne, the man who was supposed to uphold justice, is now the one sending assassins in the dead of night. Picture this. It's late. The whole city is asleep, but inside David's house, there's a frantic energy. David is throwing his essentials into a bag of waterskin, some bread, maybe his trusty slingshot. His wife, Michal, Saul's own daughter, is right there with him, her face etched with fear and urgency. She's the one who got the warning. She knows her father's rage is not just a passing mood. If you don't save your life tonight, she pleads, tomorrow you will be killed. My father has sent guards to watch the house. Think about the choice she's making. She's choosing her husband over her father, the king. She's risking everything to save the man she loves. This isn't just a domestic dispute. It's an act of rebellion against the most powerful man in the kingdom. There's no time to waste. The front door is watched. Every escape route is cut off. But Michal is resourceful. She leads David to a back window, a rope in her hand. This is it, the point of no return. She secures the rope, and he begins his descent into the darkness below. Can you imagine what's going through his mind? Just days ago, he was dining in the palace, hearing songs of his victories sung in the streets. He was a commander, a confidant of the prince, a son-in-law to the king. He was on top of the world. Now he's escaping his own home like a thief in the night, his life hanging by a literal thread held by his desperate wife. This single moment represents a catastrophic fall from grace, driven not by any fault of his own, but by the poison of another man's insecurity. He lands softly in the dirt of the alleyway below. The cold night air hits him. He pulls his hood up, casting his face into shadow, becoming anonymous. For a moment, he stands there and looks back at the sprawling palace complex, its torches flickering in the distance. That palace was supposed to be his future. It was the center of his world, the place where he was a hero. Now it's a cage with a hungry lion inside. The irony is crushing. The giant Goliath, a massive, terrifying warrior, couldn't kill him. The chaos and bloodshed of the battlefield couldn't kill him. But now, David's life is threatened by the very king he so faithfully served and protected. He is an enemy of the state, not for treason or for crime, but for being too good, too popular, too blessed. He turns his back on the palace, on the life he knew, on the man he once was. He turns and runs, melting into the shadows, heading for the wilderness. The days of being the celebrated shepherd boy, the triumphant musician, the victorious soldier, those days are over. The days of the fugitive have just begun. David is now on the run, hunted by his own king. This isn't just a story about a narrow escape. It's the beginning of a long and brutal chapter in his life. A trial by fire that will test his faith, his courage, and his character in ways he could never have imagined. He's running not just from Saul's soldiers, but from a destiny he didn't choose. How will he survive? Where will he go? And how does a man on the run become the king he was destined to be? Stick with us to find out. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for the next part of this incredible story.